my case. So that's where at Knightsbridge Solicitors we would advise you of what type of evidence that you can submit. So for example, if there has been involvement from the police, then we can get police sort of incident reports from the police. That is something that's considered as very strong evidence in a case like this. However, there may be a situation where there's been no involvement in the police, because we've got to understand that some people just don't, if you're a victim, and especially I think in the South Asian community, people try to avoid sort of, and maybe they fear reporting things to the police, so there may never be any involvement by the police, so there's nothing on record.
That's right.
So we would advise our clients not to worry about that. If there's no police involvement, we can sort of look at other aspects as well. For example, if there's been any sort of reports to perhaps a GP, so if you've attended your GP and you've expressed your concerns to your GP, that would be on your health records. So we could get a copy of your health records. That could be a form of evidence. Also, we can, if there's any sort of people that you've perhaps discussed your circumstances with, so a friend or someone like that, we can get statements from third-party witnesses. So what we would do is we could ask them to perhaps do a letter to explain what it is that they know about the case. So again, this is something that's considered as quite strong evidence. They would need to have witnessed the incident of domestic violence firsthand, and it should be someone who hasn't really got a vested interest in the case. So for example, someone who's not related to you or has got any involvement or any direct involvement in the case, then we can do things like get witness statements or a letter from someone who has got. But then I think what it's important to get out there that don't worry if you haven't got any evidence, or if you haven't got a friend or someone who's willing to come forward and sort of give a letter or a statement. Do not worry about that, because there is the Home Office, they do have a policy in place where they've got to sort of consider the case based on the circumstances. So as you can understand, there's probably thousands of cases that they're dealing with that people don't have any evidence to support their case, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a weak case or the person's not a victim. So they do have an obligation to consider cases without evidence. And also there has been sort of a leading case in this category, which is quite sort of hopeful and quite promising. So it was a recent decision of Mr. Justice Knowles in the case of Suleiman v Secretary of State for the Home Department. And that's a positive reminder from the High Court that the Home Office do consider all evidence in domestic violence applications, and they come to proper conclusions based on that evidence. So they do need to look at each case based on the circumstances of that case, even if there is no solid evidence to support the case. They do need to look at the case properly.
So that's quite encouraging, actually, for a victim of domestic violence.
Of course. So I do always explain that to my clients at the very initial consultation, because so many people are in that situation where they want to make this application, but they have nothing to go by. They have no sort of proof of the abuse that they've been suffering, and it could have been going on for years and years, and they've just been suffering in silence. They've not spoken to anyone, they've not sought any help, and there's no record of it. But I would say to my clients, don't worry, we will talk you and guide you through the process.
Fantastic conversation, Pam. We're actually going to have to go to a break now.
Yeah.
So we'll have our break and we'll be back after our break.
Yeah, I'm looking forward
Very interesting
to it.
conversation, though, I must say.
Can I say something before we go?
Yes.
Remember Ladoo?
Ladoo.
Oh, look at this lovely chocolate now, right in front of me.
I know, you're tempted, aren't you, Pam?
Yeah.
We'll be back after the break. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to the show, Pam.
Yes, I'm quite happy listening to this conversation as well. It's very interesting.
I'm wondering why you're all quiet.
Yeah, because I've got a toothache. So I'm going to have some clover throughout this.
It's not very often you see Pam quiet.
No, it's not, and I get worried when she's quiet. So, welcome back, listeners, to the Empathy Hour with myself, Amreen, and Pam, and our special guest today, Aisha from Knightsbridge Solicitors. She's a senior solicitor here and deals with immigration, and we're specifically talking about domestic violence. So, you are listening to us on Radio Dawn, and you can't call in because this is a recorded show. So getting back to the conversation, Aisha, we just want to reiterate what we are talking about today is specifically for people on immigration, spouse visas, should I say.
That's right.
So it's anyone who's suffering from domestic violence on a spouse visa.
That's right, yeah. So it's, in particular, this application is for those foreign nationals who have come into the UK on a spouse visa and their relationship has ended because of domestic violence or abuse.
Can you explain to what is a spouse visa, please?
Okay, yeah, so spouse visa, if I just give you an example, so if a British national has decided to marry someone who is a non-British national, so in a different foreign country, it could be Pakistan, India, Nigeria, it could be anywhere. So they then go over and get married to them, and then as a British national you have a right to then call your spouse over to the UK to join you and obviously settle here. So in a situation like that, if a British national married someone from a foreign country, they would then apply for a spouse visa for their spouse to come and join them. So it's for those foreign nationals who have come over on that type of visa and they're here as a spouse, and then it could be a year or 2 years into the relationship, into the marriage, since being here, that they've then started encountering problems and they become a victim of domestic abuse.
You can hear where you're coming from anyway. So if my application is refused, will I have to return to my own country?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So if we submit an application for settlement via the domestic violence route, and your application is refused by the Home Office, there are other options that we can explore. So depending on your circumstances, there may be some. I in the past I've had clients who, are in a situation where their application has been refused and they're thinking sort of what are my choices, what's the next step. And for some people it may be an option, and they might be okay with having to return back because it means they can go back and return to their family. However, for some people that's not an option. And definitely, we were discussing this earlier, in sort of the South Asian community, there's almost like it's for people who come over from a different country and they come into the UK on a spouse visa, it's almost like they come with a hope of the UK now being their permanent home and they're going to settle here. And they may feel like they sort of become a burden on their family if they have to return back to their parents. It could be elderly parents. And they may not have that option of, having to return back. And they're in some, it's quite unfortunate. Their family may not even accept them if they were to return. And I think we were talking about this earlier, that it
is a stigma, isn't it? There's like shame.
Of course, yeah.
As well.
So
although you think that we don't have this anymore, but it's still there, sadly. It's really sad, because if you look at it from an Islamic perspective, actually when parents look after their divorced daughters, there's such a great blessing in that. But actually, we still don't see it that way. We still see it as shameful.
Yeah, it's very sad that still exists. That someone who's could be a victim of domestic abuse, that there might be this element of shame, and that shame upon their family if they speak up. So yeah, it's very sad. But coming back to your question, if an application did get refused, at the beginning of the application, what we do here at Knightsbridge Solicitors is we always try to put in human rights based applications as well. So we would put in all your reasons as to if this application was refused, how it would affect your human rights. And what we hope for is that there is, if your application is refused, there is a right of appeal, and then you can then exercise